anybody who's jumping on where I basically just got this out at the last minute. Of course, it's been an eventful week in Japan news there again. I suppose you already know most of what's going on. I'll share some of my thoughts, and it's funny, I've had a few tweets this week which have actually probably been the most retweeted tweets that I've ever had, which makes me feel a little bit awkward given the subject matter. But not only that, I've actually had to look at the issues for a lot of people outside of Japan or if you're inside Japan, having relatives come to Japan. I actually have family on planned trips to come to Japan in the next month and a half, and it's really gotten to the point probably this week where it got to be sufficient that I talked to my mum yesterday and I said, yeah, you might want to reschedule it. I mean, look, for context in terms of what's going on, and we'll dive into the COVID-19. I don't like the word coronavirus actually, because basically coronavirus is a family of viruses. As I understand it, I'm certainly not knowledgeable, and I haven't learned enough about this. But from what I understand, the common cold is like 150 different sort of diseases. Almost none of them are curable. The idea that there's no cure for the cold is because there's 100 different diseases. But fundamentally speaking, coronavirus is a cold. It's a common cold. This is a new type of cold that's come out. And SARS and MERS and COVID-19 are just really nasty colds that actually can get into and trigger pneumonia, which can be and because of the viral nature of it, they're basically untreatable. Or at least the virus origin of them are, and they can last for a long time. But essentially what everyone is freaking out trying to do is avoid catching colds. In the middle of what is besides being cold season, it's also flu season, and is also hay fever season, because as of 3 weeks ago, all the pine trees up in the mountains in the middle of Honshu and throughout Japan have started releasing pine pollen. Which, for example, today it was a lovely day. Now that it's warm, it's beautiful weather at the moment, but of course it triggers all of the pine trees to release clouds of pollen, which fortunately I'm not allergic at this time of year. I suffer a little bit more in September, different plants, but the majority of people who get hay fever in Japan get it now. So people are coughing and sneezing and wearing masks for all sorts of reasons right at the time that we have all of this happening. But essentially what this is all about is people are trying to prevent the common cold from spreading. And it is possible to do, but it's a very big task. And and for various reasons that we'll go into, it's kind of well, one, I'm not sure that they're really fully committed to actually doing it, and even if they were, there'd be the question. The reason I think they might not be fully committed is they realize that it's pretty much unavoidable, the spread, and that's what's happening. So lots going on this week. But I wanted to, let's go back in sequence, start from the start of the week and work through the stories up until the escalating highlights that we've had in the last couple of days. It has gotten a little bit surreal. But I don't know, Mr. Cordy Chap. I don't know that I've made controversial tweets. I've made tweets. I always feel a little bit awkward if I'm saying something which is causing people to worry. I'm very mindful of the whole Fukushima thing, which it's kind of funny. The panic and hysteria around this compared to Fukushima is like 1%, but yet, this has caused more people to die. It actually is affecting the economy. It is affecting people. You actually have a chance of getting sick from this. So compared to Fukushima, in many ways, it's more serious. But but rightfully, people seem to have the properly calibrated concern, at least for now, about it. And I'm glad to see that people aren't freaking out about it. But I'm very sensitive to how people can do that. So in terms of who's here, we've got Quentin Rankard, Steve from Berkeley, good to see you. 3Richie21, Mr. Gordy Chap, good to see you. We've got James Kelly, the J-Vlog, salutations indeed. Chris Jack, good to see you. Tokyo 503, if you're here, please remember, say hello. It's always lovely to see who's in the comments. Remember, if you at Mark Simon like Quentin Rankard did, your comment will stand out to me, and I can see that you've said if I'm looking for some Japanese-related TV to watch, Star Media EN has a series about Richard Sorge, a World War II espionage drama from Russia. Sounds interesting, actually. I have no idea who Richard Sorge is. I should probably go look it up. But Star Media EN, so that's, I think, like a Southeast Asian satellite company, right? But they stream online, I assume. actually, well, Netflix and Better Call Saul starts again tomorrow. I'm psyched about that. That to me, I mean, there are some great series. In fact, actually, Netflix really does have great content. I mean, I loved watching The Good Place, which I finished watching recently, and Amazon Prime I'm watching a lot as well. But yes, I must admit I am most excited about Better Call Saul. And that is happening soon. We'll get to the car in a moment, but yes, Sergeant Bilko, hello indeed. Olivia D, good to see you. Tech Art too, great to see you and everybody else. Mr. Cordy Chap, you were asking about the car. Well, you know what that is. I mean, this is the car that gave birth. I mean, pretty much, half of Australia's population owes its existence to Holden panel vans like this one, or the covered station wagons. In the 60s and 70s, if you were born anytime after 1965 in Australia, chances are that this car is like your third parent. So of course we did start the week where yes, shocking news Sunday night, Monday, that Holden or General Motors is cancelling the Holden brand. Holden has always marketed itself in Australia as like the Australian car, and I must admit, in Australia, it's always a bit different going between New Zealand and Australia, where Australia's always manufactured pretty much all the cars that are used domestically, which means, or at least they have laws that force them to be manufactured in Australia, at least until very recently. So I remember as a kid, all the cars there were pretty much, Fords and Holdens. If you were kind of rich or fancy or eccentric, you might get a Toyota, or you might get like a, Mercedes-Benz or whatever. But the common people drove Ford Falcons that were manufactured in Geelong, near where I used to live, and and Holdens. And everyone, I must admit, General Motors I think was very successful, where it's just GM and Ford, and two American companies sending American engines and so on to get assembled in Australia. But Holden was pretty successful at convincing everybody that these were really Australian cars, which they were. They got a lot of Australian specific models. Whenever I was watching the James Hardy, it used to be the 500, and then it became the 1000, I think. But the Bathurst race or whatever, I was always Peter Brock. I was always a Holden fan, and to me it is kind of shocking. I've been away for 21 years, but the idea that Holden is wrapping up, I mean, it's really the passing of an age, and that is like I say, that is Australia, the incubator indeed. Sergeant Bilko, well put. Yes, I thought that was the passing of an era. I am going to. I've got a little bit of hay fever myself at the moment. Could be COVID-19, who knows? But so give me a quick moment here. Let me. Sorry, I just had to clear that up. Yes, I think I got that right. Anyway, so what else have we got here? So yes, in terms of starting to affect things, the COVID-19 scare. First thing, really, in the start of the week, the first thing to come up was the Tokyo Marathon, just about a week away from now. 40,000 people. Usually there's like 300,000 entries, and by 40,000 people get selected. So it is a lottery. You have a lot of people who train seriously for the marathon, and only a small number get to participate. However, at a time when there are now cases within Tokyo, as of today, 29 cases in Tokyo, other than the ship, of course, going around. Hey, they use those things to catch the whole North Island, or South Island actually. Oh no, North Island. That's right. North Island is the fish. So yeah, it was obviously coming to a point where, although there weren't, like, Tokyo's a city, greater Tokyo, 30 million people, 29 cases. So it's not like it's running wild, but what has been happening in the news is that the cases that are now coming up around Tokyo that are not connected to the cruise ship, is that there are now cases coming up that were not connected to China or the cruise ship. People were getting it and they weren't sure, how they got it. And there are cases like, for example, a guy in an IT company who commuted and worked while he continued to have a fever. I think I talked about that last week. Other cases that come up this week, multiple taxi drivers who have had it and worked while they've been driving people around in their taxis. There's a middle school teacher who worked for a week with a fever before getting diagnosed, and she was teaching school. And Hokkaido, there's people who work in school meal preparations and deliveries. So there are a lot of people in different situations. I mean, there was a case 2 days ago that came up in Tokyo of people who work in elderly homes. I mean, so not people you'd want to have, normally catch colds, let alone a cold that can trigger fatal pneumonia. So, it's pretty much going through now where people, it's kind of, you can't really do very much against it right now, because most of the people, who have it are asymptomatic and are passing it around, and it's popping up where people don't know how they got it anymore. So in light of that, they did decide to effectively cancel the Tokyo Marathon. It is being cancelled as a mass event anyway. The 200 elite professional runners will run, but the 40,000 people who won their tickets, apparently they'll get priority for the next Tokyo Marathon, but they've decided for now that it will just be restricted to those 200 runners. So that got cancelled, which was a bit of an upset. But yes, I think it was inevitable, and it's obviously what's happening. This is an interesting blog. I just read it. It's pretty much, it's funny. Often, I've had these questions at times on Twitter, or having people just ask me, what's it like being black in Japan? What's it like being, LGBT? It's one place where, and I do not get off on the idea that, now I'm in Japan, I'm a minority. I mean, it is the Louis C.K. being white sketch. It is true, and it applies in Japan that, when I think I get it. I have it pretty good wherever I go. I don't believe that being here gives me special insight into the experience of people that I don't share experience with. But I have friends. Geez, that sounds terrible as I start to say it. I can see and I can observe, obviously, and my observation of Japan is that generally, there is no toxic, no venomous hostility. Well, there's always something. There are always weirdos everywhere, I suppose, to some extent. But to the extent that you have Christianity and pretty much all the three, old religions of the world, basically saying that it's open season on LGBT people, which means you have a mix of actual outright just evil bigots, as well as people who feel that they're being self-righteous and persecuting LGBT people at times in Western countries. In Japan, you don't have that second element, at least, which means that generally, if you ask me, my feeling is that people are kind of more or less indifferent to it. Or it's, they'll look at it more as being weird or odd or different than they'll look at it as being a problem or sinful or anything like that. But that's what I see from the outside. I can't speak as someone who's experienced, what it's like to be in the shoes of that. So this was an interesting blog for someone just sharing their perspective. And it was interesting that Tech Art too. Yes, the marriage laws are continuing to change. Like I said, to be more specific, well, marriage is an interesting thing in Japan, of course. You can get married and divorced in Japan by just going up to the city council and filling out a form. Literally, it's like applying for it's actually easier. It's not even a permit. I was going to say it's like filing for a permit at the city council office. It's actually easier than that. You literally just register. There's some paperwork, you pay a fee and whatnot, but and divorce is the same. You don't have to convince anybody. If you want a divorce, you divorce. And so it's really not even marriage laws. It's just a question of which local councils will accept paperwork from same-sex couples. What's been more controversial and more interesting is that the paperwork system in Japan is based on if the both people have a family register, i.e. they are Japanese with family registers. The paperwork says that the woman joins the... Oh no, you know what? It doesn't actually say that the woman joins the man's registers. It says that the two registers have to get merged into one, which means that the man can take the woman's surname, which I know multiple cases of friends doing, or the woman can take the man's surname, as is the most common here, like it is in other countries. However, you can't have separate names, and you can't have hyphenated names or anything like that without going to the family court and actually making a special application. Exception, of course, is foreigners. because we don't have family registers that people by default just continue with their family registers. We actually had to go to the family court to change the surname, which was weird, but that is the thing. So yes, in terms of coming back to this blog, it was an interesting blog, and it starts off with what I assume, honestly, what I observe, which is that people generally are pretty indifferent. However, they do point out that the double-edged sword thing is an interesting point. That along with the apathy, it's to be out and to find people that you can relate to, and to connect with the community for people who are used to being sort of involved with the community. That's harder to find and harder to do. You can be you, but it's hard to sort of be that as part of a community and to find that and to get that sort of support in Japan. And I thought that was sort of interesting. Pardon me. So interesting read again, and for people who are interested, it's something that I found the insight interesting, and I hadn't considered that thing, that although no one gives a shit, at the same time nobody giving a shit in itself can be a problem, right? There's no one who, the affirmative care. And when I say no one, I mean, obviously there are people who do. I mean, it's a big city and so on, but sure, this is a challenge from this person's experience, and it's an interesting read, so I thought that was interesting. I found this really interesting on Monday. I don't really understand what it was about. Apparently the Nikkei, somehow, I don't even know if this was legal to do, but apparently they got a whole bunch of car engineers to strip down a Tesla and look at it and give their comments to a newspaper, which kind of strikes me as a bit dodgy from a trade secret perspective, but they did it. And the Nikkei decided to report that a Toyota engineer, again, why Toyota allowed someone want to participate in this too, to be basically effectively publicly spying on another company's technology, and then having the comments both from the VW and the Toyota engineers supposedly representing their company shaking their heads, talking about how amazing the Teslas were and how Toyota will never be able to catch up to the technology or production techniques that Tesla is using for 6 years. And then the reasons for that he gave were interesting. The reason that they believe that Tokyo is not going to catch up, or Toyota is not going to catch up, is that the car, like for example the electronics and so on, are very simple. They're centralized and they're all made in house. They're not sourced from multiple different suppliers. And this is the argument that the engineers were saying in Toyota, is that the complexity of the Toyota cars is partly a result of the commitments to their suppliers and to their supply chain. And the idea to create a car that's so simple and simplified would require breaking a lot of the relationships with the suppliers that are dependent on the existing car manufacturers. And to be able to pivot away from those relationships and to focus and create a car like this, to set that up would take years. And that actually prevents them from simplifying the car. So I thought that was actually a really interesting it was kind of an interesting take. I've been watching a few documentaries on Teslas. It's funny, I've been here in Japan for 21 years, and that's adjusting the seat that went down further than I thought. But yes, I must admit, I always thought I'd own multiple cars here, but living in central Tokyo, you just don't need one. So I have not owned a car, but I still love cars. I've been watching a few Tesla documentaries, and in terms of, I do like, for all the difficulties of the personality of Elon Musk and the ups and downs of the car company, what it represents, what they're doing, what they're trying to effectively speed up the future, in a way, both with SpaceX and with Tesla. The idea of having autonomous cars and electric cars, and the fact that they're promoting that, and the idea that they are getting away from the idea that these have to be golf carts, and that they can actually be really cool cars. To me, on the one hand, it's it's kind of course it's being slapped together and it's being a little bit forced and whatnot, but to me it's cool, and the fact that it's actually shifting established car manufacturers, it's actually pulling the whole world along behind it. And I think that you need people like that every few generations, and we're seeing a lot of it right now. All the stuff that I was hoping as a kid, as I talk about frequently, Lately, it seems a lot more within reach, where really 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't see these self-driving cars, all-electric cars, space tourism. I didn't see it happening until I was like maybe 70 years old or whatever. And now I see it happening within the next 10 years, and I'm really, really appreciative. But really interesting how, again, I can't believe someone from Toyota was allowed to do this, but they went up and they just said, man, Tesla is owning us. We suck. We're not going to be able to catch up to this for 6 years. Which, of course, technologically they have the ability to do, although they were impressed with the electrics, and they said they're way ahead of where they are. But the fact that they're forcing that, I thought was super cool. Olivia D. All manufacturers legit buy each other's cars and take them apart. They all know each other does, which I don't doubt. But the fact that they would do it in front of the Nikkei Shimbun and then give their public comments on the teardown to a newspaper, and talk about how, oh my god, we're screwed, this car is so awesome. All of those things are kind of, yes, interesting anyway. But it results in an interesting read. By the way, good to see some other people joining there. I'm worried about pronunciation here, but I see Queen Daenerys Stormborn Targaryen. Good to see you indeed. Good to see as well DJ Okuhari. Good to see Sainted Sir, Lysander 45, Razel Ghul at the Games Begin indeed. Good to have you along here. Have you heard the tourists have stopped coming to Japan? So lately, if you've right now is like the best time of year to go to Kyoto. The cherry blossoms will start coming out in about 2 weeks. The plum blossoms are already up, so climate-wise, it's a great time of year. And Kyoto's like empty, and so now they're doing. All of a sudden, they put up all these tourist posters, because saying "Come to Kyoto now." It's empty. I've had friends who have been there recently and reported back that yes, that is the case. So, with people talking about how Kyoto's been ruined by over-tourism, it's good right now. So definitely worth going and checking that out. One big development during the week was this man. What's his name? Iwata. Kenta. I think that says Kentaro. So Iwata Kentaro, who is a contagious disease expert from, I believe, Kobe University, he apparently has represented Japanese government in multiple outbreaks in other countries. Give me one. Including Ebola in Democratic Republic of Congo, SARS when it happened in China, and going over and supporting as part of international efforts to support the containment of these disease outbreaks in other countries. And he was interested in just assessing what was happening with the quarantine on the Diamond Princess and checking that proper outbreak protocols were being followed. And apparently he managed to get in contact with people who were running that quarantine, who he learned were members of DMAT, which is the Disaster Medical Assistance Team. In fact, I think that's probably what it stands for, from the Japanese government that responds to crises like earthquakes and tsunamis and whatnot with medical support, but are not specific experts in disease outbreaks. But they, as a division of the Ministry of Health, were primarily in charge of the site of the Diamond Princess, which had 3,500 people, all under quarantine with this outbreak on board. So he was interested in going and assessing and offering his services just to make sure that everything was sort of being done correctly. Apparently he tells the story on a video after he got a chance to visit the ship for a day, that his visiting the ship was opposed by people unknown to him, but apparently there were bureaucrats or government officials that did not want someone poking around, criticizing or whatever, or interfering with the operation. However, the person who was trying to help him out said, "Hey, look, I think I can get you in as a member of temporary member of DMAT, helping with the DMAT operations on board the ship. So you can come on board, so long as you're not coming on to audit us or do anything like that." So he did that, and when he went on board, he discovered. He gave his view that immediately when he was on board the ship, primarily the use of zoning, safe zones and red zones, the idea that there are areas where it's where you need to be in full body suits and areas where it's okay to not be in full body suits, so that the staff can tend to the people in the contaminated areas and people who are sick, but not be at risk of contaminating themselves. And he said that he found in the environment that common sense outbreak protocols were not being followed. And when he talked with other staff, he said he was alarmed that they were talking back to him like they were resigned that they were going to get it, that they were going to catch it, and there was nothing that they could really do about that, and they were just trying to manage the situation. And he was so alarmed by what he saw in terms of common sense protocols for like managing an outbreak in a confined space like the ship was not being followed. He put up a YouTube video saying that he felt the need to essentially whistleblow to shed light on the situation. The video, if you'll pardon the pun, did go viral. Indeed, it caused a lot of fuss. He put up videos in English and in Japanese that got a lot of media attention inside and outside of Japan. Forced the Japanese government to say that it was going to look into what was going wrong. In fact, the next day, the cabinet secretary said that they'd actually made a lot of improvements on zoning and whatnot. And Iwata was probably getting a lot of criticism as well from for sort of overstepping his bounds. And shedding a negative light on his colleagues who were actually handling the situation. He was at a press conference the next day, but he announced that he was taking down the videos altogether because he felt that their function had been served, which it seems that they had. That was. But of course, this was around the time this week that people were being taken off the ships, and that in itself was a thing, right? Particularly with the Americans. Supposedly the idea was that for all the people who had been on the ships and a lot of people were constantly being tested, or people who appeared to be at risk were being tested, the idea was that people who had been through the quarantine period 2 weeks and had not shown symptoms and had been tested and did not show symptoms, they could actually leave the quarantine, because the idea was that it was considered to have a 2-week incubation period, and they would have sick people remain in Japan and be treated in Japan, and people who are not sick would be allowed to either leave the ship in Japan, or as America and other countries have started to arrange evacuations, they started to have them arrange evacuations. Of course, what happened with the Americans was there are a few Americans who, as soon as they heard that they were going to face another 2 weeks quarantine in America, there were some people who were saying, well, they're just coming out of the quarantine, in Japan. By Japanese standards, they're free, they're considered free from lockdown. And so, the prospect of going to America or anywhere else and going back into quarantine for another 2 weeks was something a lot of people didn't like. One guy, I believe his name was Matt Smith or something like that, who was tweeting quite a lot, also shared how he was concerned that they were going to mix people who were. He was afraid of being put on an airplane with other passengers when he himself saw the interactions and so on, and the risk of contamination within the ship. But he didn't want to be on an airplane going back to America with other people from the ship, because he was worried about catching it from them. So he decided not to accept evacuation. And sure enough, although the CDC in America actually recommended, as they were taking the Americans off the plane, they found that 14 of the people that were being evacuated just got their test back that they had it. But the Americans decided to proceed with the evacuation anyway, and they put them all on the same plane. They put them in a cordoned-off separated area, and they thought it was good enough, but the CDC opposed it. And Matt Smith was more or less bragging after they left that, you see, this is exactly what he was afraid of, and he feels like he was the smartest man on the boat, not going with them. So that's it. They've gone back to America. A bunch of people left the ship this week, and although buses were there to pick them up and take them to certain parts around Tokyo to get themselves home, ultimately they were being taken from the port to where they could catch a train, regular public transport, to go home. And as we're learning, it's a tricky virus. There are cases where people have caught it long after the assumed incubation period, like 30-something days. There are cases where people have had the disease, recovered, and then gotten it again. And funnily enough, there was a case where we had the first Japanese people go home this week, and most of them say that they're voluntarily quarantining themselves. But we had a woman, I believe, who went home and came down with it, having tested clear, and went home as she was entitled to, and was tested positive for it after. There again, the idea that these people represent the risk, I suppose they represent a risk, but it's already spreading on its own in Tokyo, so, that kind of is what it is. But, yeah, it's been a little bit chaotic, and this reached a crescendo later in the week, but it really started with this guy pointing out that the MHLW, which didn't want anybody coming and poking around or criticizing how they were doing things, he went on the ship, and what he shared is that he was never afraid when he was treating Ebola in Africa or SARS in China, because he knew that the protocols to protect his own health were there. But when he was on that ship, he was afraid that he was putting himself in jeopardy because he didn't see that he was protected, and he was more alarmed talking to the staffers who weren't familiar with outbreak protocols at all, who were working on this, and they were all resigned themselves that they were probably going to get it. Hold that thought, because we'll come back to that. As this has all been happening, firms that can, a lot of IT firms, doesn't mean that every job you can do can be done from home, but telework or remote work is being promoted. It's something that I am able to do. I like to work in a collaborative environment, so I'm sort of playing it by ear, but it is being made available, and we'll see. I may use it more. But this is something that a lot of companies, and in a way, it's a good thing in the sense that a lot of companies, even where it's technically possible, it's been possible to telework in Japan for a long time, particularly in the types of IT consulting jobs that I used to do. It's all been it's been available for a long time, but just culture-wise, people don't like this idea of allowing people to work at home unsupervised, or not around their senpai watching them, whatever. So this is kind of forcing the issue in a good way, and it's also kind of forcing the technology to enable it, which I think is also a good thing. By the way, TechArt2 leaves a comment. I said, did you read that it is treatable with proper medical treatment? It is not deadly for them. If you're asking about COVID-19, the story with COVID-19, from what I understand and from the data from China, and on the ship, is that apparently in something like 85% of the cases where people have it, they show almost no symptoms, or symptoms so mild that they wouldn't think to get checked even if they had the symptoms. However, the serious, where it can turn into serious pneumonia and where it can result in death, and the death rates, they are lower than for flu, by the way, but they do, particularly, they stay very, very low, like 0.5% or 2.2% if you're in your 20s and 30s, which makes it interesting that a whistleblower doctor who was like in his 30s died from it. It looks kind of suspicious, if you ask me. But yes, once you go up above in your 60s and 70s, particularly 70s and 80s, the fatality rates are quite high, and the fact that it's not treatable. So it's actually, for most people who catch it, more than 80% of people who catch it, they get almost no symptoms. It's a mild cold. It is a cold. But obviously, if you have a pre-existing condition like diabetes or asthma, for example, as well as the fact that if you are elderly, it can complicate very, very rapidly, and it's not treatable. This is the problem. There's also things that we're reading here in Japan about in China, how people are finding that the diseases like this, like SARS, for example, even when people recover, the disease stays in the body for a long time, and it can actually cause problems with things like organ function and stuff like that. It's not really clear. There's not enough data yet exactly on how this one works. It's scary to see that people can catch it twice. So we just have to sort of wait and see, I guess. Tawaiwai, good to see you. So yeah. By the way, Queen Daenerys. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about. I'm really not interested in American politics. The only thing I'll say about American politics is that I wish this whole thing would just be done in 5 days, like it is in most democracies. They say when it's time to have an election, you got 5 days, start to finish, the whole thing, the whole money politics, the whole lobbyist control, and the whole fact that people don't have time to get anything done because they're always chasing fundraising and stuff like that. Or in election cycles in America. America just needs to lock it all down by none of the above. Here go 2020, none of the above. They just need to say you've got to get it all over in 5 days. It's painful. It's like the toxicity and the duration of time and money and energy that it sucks out of people. And there's nothing material to talk about. When they go around each state doing each one of these caucuses, you can't talk about any issue. You could, you can't have a meaningful policy debate for 11 months or whatever it is that they do. So yeah, they just, call each other fascists and Nazis and bros and all sorts of weird stuff, and it's just weird. And honestly, it looks, It looks to me like mental illness, the whole thing. And you guys need to stop it. That's you just need to. It can be cured. You can just pass a law saying that the whole campaigning, the whole thing, start to finish, has to be over in 5 days. That's what you should do. So yeah, and I don't want to. And by November, I'm already sick of it actually. But yes, I watch it. I'm kind of glad to have news that's not COVID-19 related to watch. But you know, it's way too much to take. So yes, right now I'm having a bit of hay fever here. Is this flu? Is it COVID-19? Is it hay fever? Who knows? But that is a thing. The main thing people are saying is, apart from be particularly careful in enclosed spaces like trains and cars and whatnot. Wear a face mask. It doesn't really do very much, but it's nominal, but it's something. Wash your hands like with soap for 15 seconds and rinse for 30 seconds. And try to avoid. Another thing that they're doing other than teleworking is companies are encouraging their employees to commute either earlier or later. So they're avoiding the main rush periods to cut down on the exposure that you get from that. So yeah. Quit ranking. No. There are good reasons to have a long process where we learn about the candidates. You can learn everything you need to know about candidates and about everything you know to elect a complete government to rule without accountability for 3 to 4 years in 5 days. We do it in most bigger countries in America. India has a democracy. They run on the same sort of rules. People, it can be done and it should be done. You don't. What are you going to learn about Donald Trump between now and November that you need him to go around and do all these, why does it have to go on for so long? So anyway, to why, good question. How's the lack of Burger King affecting me? Well, yes, the Burger Kings that I like being shut down. I have been going to Wendy's. I cut down on Wendy's because I've been trying to get down on weight, but this week, for the first time, I got down below my target 84 kgs. I was 89 when I got back from Australia, so I lost 5 kgs. And I was like below 84 when I started sparring on Wednesday, and I was like 81 when I finished. So I actually did go and have a Wendy's after that. And the Wendy's here in Japan, of course, are run by Fast Kitchen, or fucking. And I went and had a fucking Wendy's, the double American burger and the chicken consomme fries, and it was really, really good. So I must admit, I still prefer burger to fucking, but they have them here with the Wendy's, and it's pretty good. So and I'll keep doing that, and I'll keep talking about Fast Kitchen by its name because it's awesome, and they're the ones who own it, right? So yes, it's a Far King. It's Fast Kitchen. It's the nickname for Fast Kitchen, which is the owner of the Wendy's brand in Japan. This was just kind of funny. The quote here from Koizumi, the environment minister, was it he I'm trying to remember, what did he miss now again? He missed he skipped a meeting he was supposed to be at, and his explanation was hansei stowaranu koto wo hansei. So basically he's saying he's apologizing for insufficiently showing how much he was apologetic, which I kind of liked. It's a very yes minister kind of a phrase. As I mentioned, following the Tokyo Marathon being pushed back, we have now had a whole spate, basically any big industry events, the comic events, the job hiring fairs that all happen around March are all now getting cancelled or rescheduled or pushed back. Again, just out of an abundance of society, but that is what is happening. Quint Ranked, do I think the stories about the virus having escaped from Wuhan lab true? Well, the Wuhan lab ain't nothing to fuck with, as the song goes. Who knows? I saw a video, a friend shared a video from Arirang News, the Korean news agency. They haven't been showing this in Japan at all. For a start, it is what it is. It could have been made in a lab, it could have been made from a pangolin, it could have been a bat, it could have been Who the hell knows? But it's a thing, right? It's out, it's real now. Whether it's been, engineered, whether it's a CIA plot, whether it's freaking aliens and reptilians, who knows? But obviously, it's going around, and people are catching it. It's really neither here nor there whether it originated in the food market or not. I read something the other day that now they can find in the genetic traces that it seems that it spread. People who had contact with that fish market, or that became a kind of a hot spot where a lot of people got infected. But it appears to have gotten into humans like at least a month or two before it was there. I.e., it was probably actually spread from somewhere else, and it could have been anywhere else. The Arirang News video story, which I saw about it, was interesting. It pointed out that 280 meters away from the market, which was sort of claimed as the hotspot place, there is apparently a laboratory which uses bats for testing, for sort of disease research. I don't know if they use pangolins there, and I don't even know if that's where the which animal it came from and how it got transmitted to people or whatever. Funny coincidence, but again, I don't know what to believe. I don't have any information to make that sort of judgment, and honestly, it doesn't really matter. I must admit it would be scary and alarming if it was actually a deliberately designed bioweapon, and if it was engineered to have properties to make it difficult to detect and easy to spread or whatever. There's nothing, I think, that it indicates to anyone that this was a deliberately created weapon, or that it was a naturally occurring disease that escaped from a lab. But if it was who knows? It's a cold. It's a cold. It's spreading. People are catching it. It's happened before. It happened with SARS. It happened with MERS. It's happening again. The ideas, the conspiracy theories that it could be a bioweapon aimed at China from some other place. Well, clearly it's not. It's spreading in Europe. It's now spreading in Italy. It's spreading in the people are catching it in America. It's clearly not engineered to attack a certain country or a certain background of people. So no, I don't believe anything other than this is. I don't care where it comes from, honestly. So long as that would bother me if it turned out that this thing was actually a deliberately designed weapon, which I don't believe there's any evidence of. And short of that, I don't care where it comes from. Obviously it's tough that it spread in Wuhan, and it got to where it got in Wuhan because of, frankly, poor governance. We're having the same problem here in Japan when you have a look at the ship, which we're about to get to, because this came out the other day that apparently there was a quote. It was actually shown on TBS as well when they were interviewing somebody from the Ministry of Health, asking them about were they going to be testing the staff who worked on the Diamond Princess, treating people. There are like 90 Ministry of Health, MHLW, Ministry of Health, Labour Welfare workers who are working on the ship. And 4 people from those people who were working on the ship caught it, so they know that staffers who worked on the ship were catching it. But apparently, when they were letting everybody off the ship, it came out that the 90 staff were not being tested at all, and they were in fact going straight back to their regular duties, working in the Japanese government. The very next day, and when it came out they weren't being tested, there's sort of people saying, "Are you sure? Is that really a good idea? You're going to let people who've been working on a hotspot cruise ship, are you going to let them go back to working in the government? Does that make a lot of sense?" And apparently somebody in a moment of brash honesty told the press that if we tested everybody and it turned out that lots of people were diagnosed as having it, then we'd never be able to get all the work we need to do done. So we don't have any choice but to skip the testing. So yes, I translated that, and it got retweeted quite a lot, and it was kind of crazy, but it's very Japanese, right? It's we can fight it off with the will of our with sheer willpower. So that is a thing. Again, what's the whole point in maintaining a quarantine? And this is what Iwata Sensei himself said when he was on the ship. He said he was talking with the staffers and they were resigned to catching it. They weren't even trying to maintain the sort of separation for the people who are treating people. Which means, what was the point? And now they're letting them all off the boat. Well, one, it implies that the boat wasn't safe anyway, and that it wasn't effective as a quarantine, and now those people are going back and they're back to working in government and all over the place, and they're not even testing them when they consider themselves that they were exposed. So yes, Japan as well, in a different way to China, but in its own very Japanese way, is definitely now dealing with the prospect that this is going to continue to spread. I mean, I don't see really any proper effort being made to contain this. And even if they did the ship outbreak perfectly, Japan has nearly a million Chinese residents, as well as the vast majority of the 40 million tourists that come to Japan are from China. A large number from Wuhan, one of the biggest cities in China. And through all sorts of different routes, it's already all over Japan anyway, outside of the ship. Now, granted, the ship is an explosive number of people, and the numbers outside are still small in most cities, but these are the people who are coming in with untreatable pneumonia and then being tested and found to have it. We know from the numbers that there's probably like 10 people that are walking around that just haven't gotten into that situation, and it's been discovered, so it's probably spreading around already, and the numbers will go up. But again, the government seems kind of torn between acknowledging the pointlessness of trying to fight it and making an effort, but doing it I don't know, doing nothing or doing something. They're doing something, but they're doing it with a sense of resignation that it doesn't really matter, but they're just dutifully doing what they're supposed to do, but resigned that they're going to catch it. It seems weird. So I see other comments. I'm just going to go back. Quentin Rankin, not learning about Trump, but about the Democratic candidates. I don't care about the Democratic candidate. I mean, well, in the sense that I think you should be able to learn everything that you need to know about the Democratic candidates from a brochure. What are their positions on issues? What are they going to do if they're elected? What are they going to stand for? That's all that you need to know. You don't need to know. Again. And what do we see? I see my Democrat friends doing nothing but ripping on the personalities of each other. Bernie's a communist. Pete is, a shill of vested interests. Bloomberg is a racist, sexist, fascist. Biden is a creepy old man, and Warren's also a communist. I can't really tell how people differentiate here in Sandys. And that's all that the debate is, forever and ever and ever. What are you learning about them as people? We know their resumes. We hire people for jobs based on 1 hour interviews. We spend 9 months looking at these people, and we don't learn anything about them. In fact, I think the process actually means that you learn less about them. I'm talking about American politics, and I want to stop doing that. I apologize, but no, I just think it's ridiculous. Mata Gaijinka, long time no see, good to see you. Congratulations on getting your PhD dissertation done, I believe. I think I saw the updates this week, and I'm probably using the wrong terminology, but I know that you got something big done, and congratulations on that. Wow, in Korea, live people that you follow in Korea, that Tech2 follows in Korea, are cancelling events, and live broadcasts are being taped with no audience now. Well, okay, as long as they're still being taped, that would be a bit of a step. Yeah, it's always a bit of a joke that Korea wants to one-up Japan on everything, and they've definitely done it in terms of this. The disease has gone kind of crazy over there. Obviously in a few hot spots, which are related to apparently mainly to a specific religious sect, but yes, indeed. No, how they manage things, that's what you learn. Well, yes and no. Like I say, I agree to disagree. Like I say, most countries you elect people based on what they'll execute for policy, and I find that there's very little policy debate. So, yes. Quint Ranked, am I buying N95 masks? I have masks. I've been wearing them on the train to and from work. Let me see if I can show you what I've got. And I must admit, the stocks are running out. I went to go buy some more today, and they were out. So I've got a few more of these ones. These are, what is this? It's 99% virus cutting filter PM 2.5. So I've got these ones. They're pretty cool. I've got some other sort of generic ones. They don't really fit very well over the nose, so I've got a huge gap around the bridge of my nose, which again is what it is. They're not really made for having people with a proper, bridge for over the nose, but that is a thing. By the way, if you are planning to come to Japan, partly because of this, partly because of the massive typhoon number 19 last year, and also because of the sales tax increase, the GDP shrank for the first time since the last increase in 2014, and that has resulted in the Japanese yen shedding some value this week. It's like to 112 on the US dollar. To me, 120 is like where I would actually convert my US dollar savings into Japanese yen. Like that's a really good level. But right now the yen is cheap and getting cheaper based on all of this. Of course, you have to actually bring money in from the outside to be able. Hey, Shibas is here. Good to see you. You'd actually have to come into Japan in order to be able to bring money from the outside in to be able to enjoy the cheaper yen. But it is, apart from the fact there's no tourists in Kyoto, the yen is cheap, so that is a good thing as well. That is that crazy news. This is the actual quote. In fact, this is the person, so I can read it to you. It's 厚労省の内部では船内に入った職員から検査を行うことが一度は検討されましたが So we considered at one point testing all the people who were inside the ship from MHLW. ただし陰性者が多く出た場合には業務への影響を懸念する声が上がり見送られたということです。There were people who were concerned that if we got lots of positive results back from the test, it could impact on all of the work that needs to be done. So we decided to postpone it. Or literally, we decided to skip it. Not even postpone. Postpone implies it's going to get done. We decided against it. So that was literally an MHLW worker explaining why they did not test anyone from the ship and why everyone is going back to work, commuting on the subway trains with us into central Tokyo, and that is a thing that is happening. And then the next day there was another technical miss by the MHLW. They let 23 passengers off where they didn't actually test that they didn't have it, and so now they're trying to find them and ask them to come back and get tested, just to see if it was a mistake, letting them get on trains and go back to their homes. So, doing their best, but not always working. America did raise the travel advisory for Japan yesterday. You can still come, but they're saying if you have pre-existing conditions or you're elderly or whatever, and the travel is not essential, you might want to consider another time. So it still is a pretty soft warning. South Korea, I believe the warning has gone up quite a long way away. I think this is the last story that I have. I found this today. This was actually Laura on Facebook shared this, and I thought that was really, really cool. This is it's a long essay. It's worth reading. It's about a magazine that was put together not essentially by. This is really before feminists existed. This was in the 1910s in Japan. So Japan had just been opened up. Like 60 years before it was. I guess going to the Taisho period. But a number of women in central Tokyo from well-to-do families who were able to publish basically started sharing writings, and the idea was to start a magazine for women to share writings on topics that they found mutually interesting. But it became because sometimes they wrote about topics, for example, how to leave your husband, or thoughts on abortion, for example, thoughts on women's rights and empowerment and so on. Multiple times for violating public morals, the police came in and raided them and confiscated all the copies. It's funny, and the thing is, like, Japanese democracy in the Taisho and in the Meiji periods it's a super interesting subject. There were democratic movements. There were all sorts of. There was incredible social change during these times, and there was a lot of stuff that went on around that period. But I never heard anything like this, anything approaching a sort of suffragette feminist movement. And the story themselves, they go into a lot of detail about their specific episodes that caused a lot of trouble. And it's really interesting to read, just for a bit of context on how Japan modernized. And it really, really modernized really rapidly. It's a fascinating essay to read, so I highly recommend it. I tweeted it earlier today. But Atlas Obscura, the banned Japanese feminist magazine that showed you how to leave your husband. It's a really great read, and highly recommended. We're up in time. Well, there we go. Well, I've gone through all the topics. That is the show. Is that if there's anything that you'd like me to talk about, otherwise I'm happy to do it. But otherwise, I am going to go and get some sleep. I'm sorry it was a late start again today. Again, if you're in Japan, take good care of yourself. It is, of course, hay fever season as well as everything else season. Please try not to catch a cold. Get a face mask, take care of all of that sort of stuff. Hika Simon, this is the subject of your dissertation. It's me? No, that wouldn't be that. Then I'd say you'd be screwed. This is the Pacific Island. That was something you did in the past, right? About the Pacific Island democracies. But yes. Anyway, the big butter in Japan. I all I can see is random comments at the moment, and I see big butter, and I immediately feel angry. So I'm going to look away. But look, we're all okay in Japan. There's nothing actually in a city of 30 million people. 29 people have this, but yet it is global headlines. That said, certainly we all catch colds all the time. It's going to go around. Take good care of yourself. Stay healthy, and don't worry too much. But obviously keep following this sort of advice. If you have plans to come to Japan, I've got a friend who came on Friday. I had dinner with him on Saturday. His plan was to go skiing. I suggested to him to go up into the mountains as soon as possible. I did say I was not up for going to karaoke in Shinjuku at this exact moment in time. So yes, Mata Gaijinka, you'll have some new tracks up very soon, so listen to them and enjoy. I will be sure to look out for that, Mata Gaijinka. Glad to hear that you're back into making music, which is something I have to do myself. Mr. Kordychev, you'll come just to catch the virus. Well, yes, catch the Japan fever. For now, that's right. The only thing I guess people have to worry. There are other well-known types of fever that people catch, which I still think are the main thing to worry about in Japan. So all of that. Take good care of yourselves, everybody. Get lots of sleep. Eat your vegetables. Stay cool. Keep cool till after school. Remember to like if you like the video. I do appreciate it. And thanks for swinging by and joining in the comments. As always, remember you can follow me on Twitter, see what's going on. Have a good week, everyone. Boom. Peace.